Welcome to Custom Homebuilders Solutions, also known as CHS, a job costing, full accounting, and profit management software designed specifically for the professional home builder. Hello everyone. In this particular video, we are going to talk about setting up what we call Payors in CHS. Payors can be customers, home buyers, investors, lenders, banks, etc., and that anybody that actually pays you money. So they are called payors. So what I'm going to do is go to this section on the home menu for payors, receivables, deposits. And first of all, you'll see what are payors. They're entities that pay your company money. Examples are, just like I just said. And then there's something called payors and buyers list and setup. So we're going to click that. First of all, when you open it, you'll see that there's a list of all the payors, and they are sorted by the code that you've assigned them. I'm going to come back and change this code, I think, in another video on one of those that has my name on it. Anyway, when you need to add a new, well, first of all, notice that if I click on these, you'll see information that we'll be adding when we add a new one. But to add a brand new payor, oh, and by the way, I need to mention that if you're brand new to CHS, there will be two payors here, MISC and unknown. Those are ones used by the program, and you'll notice you cannot edit them or delete them, etc. But you'll see two payors in the list, and you can start adding your payors like I'm going to do now. So to add a new payor, you click this button, Add New Payor, and the first thing it wants you to do is assign a 10-digit or less alpha or numeric character with no space by typing it in. The reason that this is a drop-down box is just so that you can look to see what other codes you may have used throughout the database, because you cannot repeat employee IDs or vendor IDs because they need to be very specific and unique. In this case, we have a new home buyer that's talking about buying a home named Sam Subin. So I'm going to, as I suggest in the help document, you should start with the last name or make it meaningful so that you know how to find them. But I suggest starting with the last name in your code, because there's several reports, etc., that will, print out by the vendor code. So you kind of like them to be alphabetical. So I start with the last name, and I suggest using all caps just because these will be used as headers in various reports. I also say that all caps, since payor names are often used as headers on reports. And then I'll type Sam Subin in here as the name. If it was Sam and Mary Subin, I could do that, etc., if there was a wife involved. And it tells me, this list of payors, it tells me after this payor is set up, I'll need to refresh the list to see it in the list. That's because we're sort of leaving the list right now. And I can't tell this one. It's going to unclose and open another window when you set up a new one. If you put any weird characters in the name or spaces, this says with no spaces in the code, and you submit, you'll get an error. Like if I have a space there and I submit, it says it was not submitted because there are errors. And you can hover over the field to see what it says about what your error is, or hover over the exclamation point, and it says only alpha or numeric characters are allowed with no spaces, etc. So I can change that. Go over here and click and backspace, and it won't go out of red, being sort of in red until you submit it again. So it liked that one. So here we are on our screen, and I think it's actually very self-explanatory, almost all of it. There's our payor ID, and we will talk a little later about if you decide how to change that payor ID. Then there's a status of active or inactive. If you set it to inactive, it won't be available in some drop-down list where you're trying to add new receivables or maybe deposits. And it also makes it so that you can come in and just click this button to say show me only the active. When you get the payors list open over here on the left, behind this window, you can see how there's an active and inactive. So maybe you're just wanting a report of just your active vendors or something. You might search for active vendors and then do reports on that list, as we see later, for lists of payors. The next thing here, and by the way, there's a question mark button here talking about help for that status. It tells you some things about it. Let me click that again. So if you drop down, it's active or inactive. And there's information there and in the help document. So I'll close that. The type, it'll default to miscellaneous. If you want to set up some types, notice the types that I have here: customer, employee, investor, lender, miscellaneous, owner. We also have some rental properties. So we have some payors who we're calling renters. The type helps you search for things like if you're searching for accounts receivable information, you can search by vendor type, by payer type. Just say I want to see all the accounts receivable for the renters, renter types, or home buyer types. They called theirs customer. You could call it home buyer. I have just split this video for a moment because the screen is a little different now, and we will maybe come back to this and talk about how you can just do additional context that you're not seeing on the screen that I have in most of this video. But we were talking about payer types, and if you want to add new payer types, you can click the plus icon here, and a window will open where you can set up your own payer types. Maybe you have some other, maybe you want to call it a home buyer, etc. And to add a new payer type, you would just click that, type in like home buyer, and then click submit, and then close, and you will see it in your list. And when you close this and do your drop down, you will see that new one in there, and you could select it. So I'm going back to the older screen. Just wanted to show a little bit of difference in setting up the payer type. So we're going to call this one a customer, which means to us that they're a home buyer, and we'll just make up some place they live here. Alpine dropped in because that's the town that this builder is in, and that's the zip code. And you could do the contact name. Maybe you're setting up a payer that's like a title company or a bank or other entities that give you money, and it's Alamo Title Company, and you want to have a contact name there. This one is the same as the payer, but you could type that in for some information. You can put in your payer's email address, and then of course home phone number, mobile phone number. Maybe there's a wife. When there's a wife, maybe you're putting a mobile too, etc. If there's a work extension 343, you can do that. And then you can type any notes, and I can just say this is the home buyer for the job Subin. I happen to know that code that I gave to that job. I set up a job called Subin already. So that's really all there is to setting up a payer. There's not a whole lot of magic to any of that. The main thing to know about is the type and the active, which could be handy, is to use the type for searching for various things. So if I save that and I close that, you'll see that Subin is not yet in the list. I could either just do an S to make sure, because it'll re-get information right there, or I could do show all to do that. There's not a button on this window that just exactly says refresh. You just do show all, and it'll be there because that's actually refreshing it. And if I need to edit anything about that Sam Subin that I forgot, I could click the pencil edit icon now and open that same window. And you'll see that we have information over here. If you typed a lot of notes, there's some expanding of these notes that you can do just to look at them. Every time you click on it, you'll see different information over here. Now what I'd like to show you real quick before we leave this subject of setting up payors, I might be setting up a new job for Subin, but there's already one here in this builder's list. and we don't want to bog down ourselves in this video by actually setting up a whole job. That's another whole video. But in the job videos, I talk about attaching a buyer to the job. And if you need to set up a new buyer, you can go through the very same things that we just did to add a new payer. And you can do it from the job screen. But I've already set up the payer, so I just want to type Subin and select that as the payer. And there's a reason you go ahead and fill the first names and last name here, because it's used a little differently than using the names from the payer setup. Other videos I'll talk about setting up the buyer with online access to get on and see things that you authorize. That's a whole other video. But the reason I wanted to show you me attaching it to this job is that when you use a payer ID, let's say to add a new deposit or to add a new receivables entry, accounts receivable, but let's just do one quickly, add new deposit. Now that it's connected to a job, when I select Subin, you're going to notice that it looks to see if it's connected to a job, and it will just supply the job and the department that's connected to the job. If I select one of my renters, which I happen to know is David Rollins, it's finding another job connected to that, and it's in our property management department, that job, etc. So that's why it's handy to go ahead and select that payer that you set up. If that payer is going to be for a certain job, it makes a lot of your other data entry pretty handy that you've connected up that job and that payer. So that's about all there is to setting up a brand new payer. I'm going to come back in another short video and talk about changing the code for the payer, and then I'll talk about deleting, and in those two videos we'll be talking about how you can look at where that vendor has been used, and then in a video after those we'll just talk a little bit about searching and various reports that you can produce or labels from this Payor list. Thank you for watching.